Hello everyone, back out on the water in my crawdad. It's a little bit of sea smoke on the water. That's because the water temps are pretty warm, and this morning I think it was 39 degrees on my home thermometer. It's a little bit warmer now, but there's still some of that sea smoke hanging around. So we're going to get into it in just a second. But I thought today we'd do something a little different. And that's a lure unboxing on the water. I've seen some unboxing videos on YouTube, and they're all pretty interesting. But often I wonder, what does that bait look like in the water? Or how does that bait cast? Or does that bait float or sink or suspend? And it's hard to tell in somebody's garage or basement or sitting on the deck of a boat. So I thought it'd be fun to do a lure unboxing on the water and actually tie some lures on and get them wet, give you my first impressions, and go through all that fun stuff. So that's what we're going to do today. So we've got two boxes here. I'm going to start with the little box first. And that's because I know it has a single lure in it. I think that's because it came from a different warehouse. And that lure is the Evergreen JT-115 in Flash Wakasagi. I don't have any Wakasagis near me, but it sort of looks like a herring. Could be a shad too. And if you hold that bait so that the split rings and the trebles don't shake and then rattle it or try to rattle it, it's completely silent. So all you hear is the noise of the split rings and the hooks if you shake it like that, like I just did without holding anything together. But there is no ball inside, there is no weight transfer system. And at first I was a little concerned about how well that bait would cast. So I got the bigger size. There's two sizes, and that is the 115 size. There's also a 95 size. And so I'll take a few casts with this, and if I like it and catch some fish on it, I'll probably pick up the 95 size later. So it comes with a split ring on the nose. Some walking baits do, some don't. I usually prefer to take that split ring off and tie a loop knot. I know people have strong feelings about loop knots versus split rings. There are pros and cons to both. With a split ring, you can tie any kind of knot that you like. And a lot of those knots will be stronger than a loop knot. I think the baits usually walk better with a loop knot on them. And to compensate for the weaker knot strength, I go up in leader size. And that also helps keep that front treble off of the line. So thicker line will keep it from getting tangled on itself while it's walking, especially if you cut it really hard. That front treble sometimes likes to snag on walking baits. So it walked pretty well right next to the boat. I made a longer cast and it flew through the air no problem. I've got no wind right now. It might be a little different casting against a headwind, but it seems like it casts pretty well. Every once in a while it'll make a little bubble. And the other thing it does is it seems to want to dive underneath the water, not far, maybe an inch. Every once in a while it dives. And I don't love that. Now that could be because I tied to the split ring and I didn't tie a loop knot. So a little bit later on I will take that split ring off and try it again with just a loop knot and see if it walks better. The other thing you can do is you can add a feathered treble to the back and that added resistance will help keep it up. It's not severe at all. The gills on this bait also are somewhat pronounced. So it has like a molded in gills on the bottom of it. And those also might catch some water and, make that bubble or make it want to catch on the water and go under. Like I said, it's not dramatic. It's pretty minor, and I think I can fix that. So overall, I'll give the JT-115 a thumbs up. Maybe a little bit more work to do there. All right, now we're getting into the big box. Kind of forgot what I ordered. And we're just going to dive into it in no particular order. The first bait is a little Yo-Zuri Pencil 75. I don't hear people talking about Yo-Zuri baits a lot. They make a lot of good baits that kind of fly underneath the radar. And the price point is very good. They've got some good colors. They're not a high-end company though. They're more like a everyday lure company. And what I was looking for is kind of a BFS spook type bait. And I saw this and I thought, you know what? This could work. So the first thing I notice is that it doesn't have a split ring on the nose. So I'm going to tie a loop knot. Now my leader here it happens to be Yo-Zuri Hybrid 6-pound test, which is really more like 10-pound test for other fluoro leaders. And I really should be using a straight mono leader. Maybe something like 8-pound Maxima Ultra Green, something like that. But this is just what I have tied on, and this is what I'm going to use. The mono floats higher in general, and that's what you want for walking baits. You want the leader up on the water and not pulling the nose of the bait down. So I don't use any swivels or snaps. I don't even really like split rings, like I said. I want as light a weight as possible on the nose of that bait. And because the loop knot isn't a great knot, I'm adding just a little dab of super glue there, just for a little extra insurance. And because I don't have mono. There it is. That's the bone color. A little better view there. And it's just a mini spook type bait. So I had BFS in mind for this, but it could be useful anytime that the fish are on small baits or they're a little bit fussy. And I was a little nervous about how well it would cast, but it casts great. It's not a heavy bait at all. It only weighs 1/4 ounce. It's got a ball in the back of it, and it does seem to help it cast true. The hooks aren't super high end, but I'll probably just use it as is until I wear out those hooks and then upgrade them to some owner hooks or gammy hooks. And it walks great. Sometimes when manufacturers downsize their baits, they just take the same mold and shrink it in a 3D drawing program, and it doesn't transfer well. But this actually walks very well for a little tiny bait. And I can see this lure getting a lot of action. This bait could have been handy when I was on some fish busting 2 to 3 inch herring. Oh my goodness. It looks just about perfect. It's another color I really like from Yo-Zuri. It's called Gizzard Shad. And they didn't have it in stock. Maybe because it's a popular color. But the bone color should be fine too. So yeah, casts great for a 1/4 ounce bait. Walks great. I'm not going to have to do any modifications to it. I'm just going to fish it right out of the package. Put a loop knot on the front because it doesn't have a split ring. And go. So, thumbs up. That's a keeper for sure. And here's another look at that bait. It's got a little bit of orange hit on the nose. But otherwise it's solid bone. Okay. Next up we got some tungsten tube heads. I don't have any tubes with me, so I'm going to put that to the side. Beast Coast sticker. I ordered some Beast Coast trailers. And those are Hayabusa narrow gap offset hooks. And I had those in mind for fluke. And I've got a bunch of other fluke style baits, and we'll get to those a little bit later. Okay, we've got some owner split rings. These are the best freshwater split rings I've found. I use them for all kinds of stuff besides walking baits. We've got some G Finesse hybrid worm hooks. These run large, but they're also great for flukes. We'll get to those a little bit later. And this is a Rapala Skitter walk. I've used larger sizes of these in saltwater, but I haven't really fished them much in freshwater. It's not a new bait, but I kind of like this chrome color. I don't fish a lot of chrome, and I thought I'd give it a try. It's got a little hit of red on the nose, or I guess the chin. And it's kind of a thick bait. It's short and stubby. And I'm going to put it on a spinning rod just because that's what I have handy. You could also fish it on a casting rod. And a yellow jacket decided to fly actually in between my legs and land on the boat deck here. So we have to pause the lure review and get rid of the yellow jacket. I think he's a little cold shocked just because it was so cold this morning. And look at that. The Skitter Walk package works great for bee removal too. Okay. Back to tying on the Skitter Walk. So the Skitter Walk doesn't come with a split ring on the nose. So you know what I'm going to do. I'm going to tie a loop knot on the front. I've got a leader of 12-pound Maxima Ultra Green on here. The loop knot that I like, and there's a bunch of them, is called the Homer Road loop knot. And again, it's not the greatest knot in the world, but basically it's a slip knot that you jam with a 2-turn clinch. You could do 3 turns too. And what I like about it is you get a perfect little loop every single time. And I can tie this in a rocking boat in the ocean. I can tie it at home. And I always get a perfect small little loop. And to make sure that loop just doesn't slip at all and stays in place, just a little bit of insurance here in the form of super glue. A little tiny dab right on the knot. That's all it takes. Got to put that super glue away before it wreaks havoc with all my new lures. The hooks on the Skitter Walk I would say, aren't the greatest hooks. They're some kind of standard VMC round bend trebles, and I will probably upgrade those. But for right now, I'm just going to fish it stock, see how well it walks, see how well it casts. I know the saltwater version casted very far. Like the Yo-Zuri Pencil 75, it's got a weight transfer ball on the back, and it's got a nice rattle to it. And that also helps with the casting. And I've got 10-pound braid on the spinning rod, and so that bait absolutely flies through the air. Walks well, doesn't want to dive. The front of the bait is a little bit blunt, and every once in a while it'll make a bubble, and I think it's because of the blunt nose. But yeah, it casts a mile, walks well, and the only thing I'm going to do with it is upgrade those hooks, and I might take a look at those split rings too, but they're probably okay for what I need it for. Still walking that bait because it went out so far. Yeah, I think this would be a great bait if you were on shore. You wanted to reach some fish that were quite a distance from the bank. Or maybe you're running around a boat chasing schooling fish and you're having trouble reaching them. For a small bait, it's kind of heavy and thick, so it casts far as a consequence. It doesn't have a super long glide, even if I slow it down. I'd probably walk it pretty fast anyway if I was fishing it. It's got a hard knock. And that's it. Yeah, so this lure I'd also give a thumbs up too. Somehow I wrapped it around my braid, but I will take care of that later. We don't need to watch me fiddle around with braid and hooks. Okay, next up is the Shower Blows 77.7. Another evergreen bait like the JT-115. I have the Shower Blows 125, and I like that bait. It's a pretty big bait. I keep looking for 105s, but every time I look, they're already sold out. It's got quite a long feathered trailer on it. That rear dressed feathered trailer is, I don't know, about half the size of the bait. Seems a little much to me. It's got a ball in the back to help casting and also make some noise. But it's a pretty small bait. It's about the same size as the Yo-Zuri Pencil 75. Maybe just a little bit bigger. And it has a split ring on the nose. So I'm going to tie directly to that split ring. Skip the loop knot for now. Tying a double wrap simple clinch which isn't the greatest knot, but it saves on line. The Evergreen baits have sticky sharp hooks, and this one is no exception. So I don't think I'll be upgrading those hooks. They seem plenty sharp. I'll just use them until I wear them out. Eventually I'll get that knot together. It's not the greatest knot, but it does save on line. I'm burning through leader at a rapid pace with all these lures. It's a little bit better than just a simple clinch knot, but a little bit of super glue for insurance. I've got it on my BFS rod. Like I said, it's only a little bit bigger than the Yo-Zuri Pencil 75. I guess that makes sense because it's the Evergreen Shower Blow 77.7. And those are usually figures in millimeters. So yeah, all that makes sense. I started to drift off the point I was camped on, so I'm just running my way back up. So first impressions, it casts great, walks great. It has a little bit more resistance than the Yo-Zuri bait because of the cupped face, so it's just a little bit harder to walk. I mean, you have to put a little bit more force into it to get it to work properly. It's not a big deal. It's a small bait, and we're not talking about a lot of force to get it to walk, but it's noticeable. And over the course of a day, you know, you might feel that a little bit more if you were fishing one bait over the other. That long tail actually acts more like a pivot point too. Almost like chopping a glide bait, because that long dressed tail is about half the size of the bait. I'm sure it works, but to me it's kind of an odd choice because I'm looking for something with a small profile to match 2 to 3 inch herring, and then they increased the profile of the bait by 50% with that long dressed tail. So I could replace that treble hook, no problem. That's not a big deal. I could cut it down, but then I'd mess up the feathers. It's kind of a nice dressed treble, so I'll have to think about that a little bit more. I'm sure it would work right out of the box. I feel like I might want to tinker with it a little bit though. But casting on BFS gear is great. Casts really far. I'm used to throwing a Super Fluke Junior on this rod, so anything that casts better than that seems like casts forever in comparison. And this would be great early in the morning, anytime the fish are on small bait, pressured fish, say they stop eating a larger size shower blow, you could switch to the smaller versions and maybe catch a few more fish. So yeah, this is going to stay in my arsenal. I just might want to tweak it a little bit. I don't think I mentioned it before, but the color is called Neon Wagasaki. It's a good general baitfish color. I don't think you could go wrong anywhere in the country with that color. Could be just about anything. Alright, next up we have the Megabast Karashi. And I probably should have looked at the description a little bit closer, but I was kind of surprised at how small that bait is. It's about half the size of the Evergreen Shower Blows 77.7. And even the package that it's in is tiny. And I had a heck of a time getting it out of the package. The hooks that come with it are tiny. So this is definitely a bait that I would be throwing on BFS gear. I do eventually get it out of the package, it just takes me a little bit. Sticky hooks stick right into carpet. Again, the rear treble is about half the size of the bait. It looks like crystal flash to me. It's a nice looking bait. Could be any kind of bait, I think. Herring, smelt, shiner. It just has that bait fish kind of look to it. It's kind of expensive for such a small bait. And what I was thinking is that pickerel are going to love this thing. Now, I don't know if I should tie a loop knot to this bait or a standard knot. And what I'm going to do first is tie a standard knot, just because I feel like it's going to be very darty and I want to get the most darting action I can out of it. But yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do with this bait, because in most of the waters that I fish, there's a lot of pickerel, and pickerel are going to just cut that thing off before I even have a chance to really catch some fish on it. So I might use it for something like stream trout, or any place that I'm pretty sure there aren't any pickerel. Which is rare around me. It doesn't cast really well. That's partly because it's such a light bait. It also could be because of the giant feathered treble on the back. Acts like a windsock. Once I got it wet, it seemed like it cast a little bit further, but it doesn't cast really far. It's a small bait. I mean, it's tiny. And it has tiny treble hooks too. So you really need a BFS type rod even to fish this bait. And if you got a big fish on it, I think you'd have to be careful with it so you don't bend out those little treble hooks. It's possible that I can upgrade those treble hooks and put on some stouter hooks and bigger hooks, but I might screw up the action of the bait. So this one, I'm going to have to think about some more and play around with some more. It's not a bait that I even feel comfortable test casting here, because I know there's a lot of pickerel, and it just looks like something that pickerel would eat immediately. But it does twitch pretty well. It's supposed to be an underwater twitch bait. There's a few companies that have underwater twitch baits. For whatever reason, this one seems to be one of the more popular ones. I assume that's because it works pretty well. I bet if you are on 2 to 3 inch bait, or even 1 to 2 inch bait, and you couldn't get them to hit anything else, this would be a good bait to have in your back pocket. Pull out when there was a tough bite. But for me personally, I have to really think about how I'm going to use this bait and where I'm going to fish it, because I just can't see me fishing it in a lot of the places that I fish. But it is very darty. Looks good in the water. I think it would work well. I just have to think more about where I'm actually going to fish the thing. And I might save it for trout, because I think trout would eat that. I don't think I mentioned the color. It's called Kasumi Ito KS. Just a good herring type bait fish pattern. Next up we have a Yo-Zuri 3DR jerkbait. I actually got this bait to troll for trout in the winter, but I'm going to tie it on just to see how it looks. And I also got a Yo-Zuri 3DR minnow bait. We'll start with the 3DR bait. That's in a rainbow trout pattern. It has a clear plastic shell on the bait, and then kind of like a rainbow trout decal on the inside. So it doesn't look really high end, but the upside is, since the finish is encased in plastic, it really can't wear out. I mean, you can get hook rash on it and bite marks, but the finish is on the inside of the bait, so it can't peel off or wear off. It's sort of hidden inside the bait. One of the things I look for in minnow type jerk baits like this is, if you put them in the water, do they float, suspend perfectly, or sink? So we're going to test that out. After I put a little dab of super glue on that knot. I go through a lot of super glue in case you couldn't tell. Seems to dart well. You can also fish that bait on a straight retrieve like a crankbait, which is actually, I guess, how I'd be fishing it if I was trolling it behind the boat. I had a weed there for half the retrieve. Cast pretty well. Everything seems to cast well in comparison to the Super Fluke Junior, which is a weightless bait. Now I want to see how it suspends after I've made a few casts. And it is more like a slow float. It doesn't truly suspend, but it takes a while to rise to the top. It doesn't float like balsa, it doesn't float like a cork, but it definitely floats. So if you were going to fish this like a jerkbait, especially in cold water, if you gave it a 10-second pause, it's going to float up away from the fish, which I don't really love. It came with pretty small hooks, so a little bit later on I'm going to upgrade those hooks. When I get home, I'll put a size larger on and see what that does. Now we've got a Yo-Zuri pencil. It's in that real smelt color. It's got a casting ball at the end, so it makes a one knocker type noise. I have a similar bait in a gizzard shad color, and I know it works. This is a little different bait, and it weighs just a little bit less. Yo-Zuri has a lot of baits that, or a lot of product lines that seem like they overlap quite a bit. This is basically the same bait that I've always fished. It's just about a 1/16 ounce lighter. But otherwise, they look to be identical. And since they're so similar, I wanted to get a different color just so I could tell them apart more easily. In the lakes that I fish, the herring either have kind of a dark back or a purpley back, or they have a brown back. And so this real smelt color, to me, doesn't really look too much like smelt. It looks more like a herring with a brown back. I think that's two different species of herring. There's alewife and blueback herring. But in some lakes, they just have a different coloration than other lakes. And I think that could be because they're different species, but it also just could be the coloration of the water and water clarity and other factors like that. So it could be part environmental, part genetic. I don't really know, but I do know that different lakes have different color herring. And it didn't come with a split ring on the nose, so I tied a loop knot. It casts great. I don't really notice the weight difference. Walks great. It doesn't want to dive underneath the water. The hooks that it came with are okay. I'll probably upgrade those before I start fishing it for real. They're not VMCs, I don't think, but they feel a lot like the Rapala Skitter Walk VMC round bend trebles. They're that kind of quality hook. There's nothing wrong with them, and you could fish it stock. I just feel like I could do a little bit better if I upgraded those trebles to something a little bit sharper, maybe a little bit thinner wire, and maybe even treble hooks with a slick coating on them. Sometimes bass will just slap at spook type baits as they're walking back and forth, and if the treble hooks aren't sharp or aren't premium quality, you can end up missing more fish than you should. But otherwise, walks great, casts great, no issues. So I'll give that one a thumbs up. That's a keeper. Alright, we're going back to the Yo-Zuri Jerkbait 90 SP. It's a 90mm bait. And I was going to use this trolling for trout. It's a little big for trout, but I think a brown trout will be able to eat it no problem, or any trout big enough to eat minnows that size. Could also use it for bass. It's kind of a small jerk bait for bass, but it would work. Maybe in the winter or highly pressured fish. But the key thing for using it as a jerk bait for bass is that it suspends perfectly. This knot's giving me a little bit of trouble, but I'll get there eventually. This is a double line clinch knot. It's a really good knot. Super strong. Sometimes it's called a 3-tag knot or a shark knot or a double shindo knot, but really it's just a double line clinch knot. It's been around forever. So I'm just going to flip it next to the boat, see how well it twitches. And it twitches pretty well, and now's the real test. Just like the other minnow bait, this jerk bait is a slow floater. It already comes with pretty big hooks, so I don't want to upsize the hooks too much more. But I could try fishing with heavier split rings and heavier gauge hooks. That's not ideal for fishing a jerkbait. You want light wire hooks usually, hooks that kind of set themselves if the fish just slap at a bait. It would be fine for trolling, and that's my main interest in it. But if you were going to use it for what I'm doing now, fishing it as a jerkbait for bass, it wouldn't be my favorite. You can fish it with short pauses and it would be fine. But in the winter, if you were using long pauses, especially in cold water, it's going to float up and away from the fish, which is not what I like. So, overall, I think it's fine. It has some imperfections, but for my purposes, it's going to be fine. Okay, I'm going to cut the video off here for hard baits. Soft baits will be in part 2. Otherwise, this video is going to be way too long. I'll put all the info about the baits in the video description. I'm limited on characters, but I'll try to put weight on my own scale and any notes I have about the bait, whether a suspending bait floats, stuff like that. Thanks everybody for watching. I'll catch you on the next one. See ya!